I took these off my holly trolley to stack them up for the thumbnail, but I did not consider where I was going to put them afterwards, particularly given that there's a whole other stack. Okay, well this is going to amuse somebody, but probably not me. Are we stable? I don't mean mentally, because the answer to that is always no. But like structurally, are we good? Nope, not good, not good. It's Win and welcome back to another video. Today's video should really be subtitled The One in Which They Get Ruthless, because I am not gonna lie to you guys, in 2025 I am not the one. With the advent of 2025's bingo board from hell and my continuing quest to read 60% of the books that I haul in a year, I am now more than ever determined to unhaul the hell out of my shelves this year. Anything which isn't a book which I either actively want to reread or have not yet read. Anything out with those categories is going. Because if 2025 is anything like 2024, then I'm gonna need the shelf space. Honestly, if nothing else, the bingo board from hell challenges have shone a light on the limits of the amount of physical books which I can keep in my house. And speaking of shining a light, I would like to introduce you to the sponsors of today's video, Serious Readers. If you've been keeping an eye on any of my vlogs over the last few months, then you will know that the only reason why I have been able to make it through this many books in the dark winter months is solely with the assistance of Serious Readers. Because when it's just me, my hyperfixations and all of this tiny font, the only person advocating for my eyeballs is Serious Readers. Serious Readers are a small UK company with staff that love their jobs and love to help you find the right reading lamps for your home. But Serious Readers lamps are not like any other reading lamps on the market because they use a technology called daylight wavelength technology. And to put it really simply, daylight wavelength technology means that under the beam of a Serious Readers light, your eyes can't tell the difference between the doom and gloom of the winter months and real, actual, normal ambient daylight. I'm not talking basking under a sun lamp here, although if you are my cats you might have a different opinion on that. But the standard amount of midday, no lamps on in your house daylight, aka the kind that your eyes like the most. It means that your eyes are not straining, they're not constantly having to adjust for a change in your environment, and there's overall less squinting, which also means less tension headaches. And as somebody who is tense enough in their life, I appreciate the little helping hand. So if you would like to get your hands on a serious discount on your Serious Readers lightwear, and you can use my code here on screen, WIN, that's WINN, and my link down below in the description to have the solution to all of your reading, crafting and cookbook conundrums sent straight to your door. Alright. It is occurring to me right now that I am the conundrum and also the solution to all of my problems. Because when it comes to filling up my bookcases, there's nobody except for me to blame. Let's just take it from the top, shall we? And let's get rid of one series in its entirety. This is the Thursday Murder Club series by Richard Osman. I'm just now realising that these are probably not in order and that's going to really upset some of you. But I'm good with that because this series really upset me. Because as you can see, it is a series which somehow snuck by my traditional buying rules. It has been over the past 3 or 4 years my rule that if I haven't read the first book in a series, unless it's some sort of like very limited special edition that I'm deeply invested in for whatever reason, and if it disappears I'll never be able to get my hands on it again, which by the way is called a scarcity scam, something that special edition books do to us quite a lot, you know, convincing us that we desperately need the shiny thing and that we will never be able to live without the shiny thing, but the shiny thing is only a limited number, it's only available for a limited amount of time, and if you don't get it, what you're going to get instead is a massive case of FOMO, you know, that scarcity scam. Yeah, so I still occasionally participate in that. I too have not developed immunity to special marketing, but for the most part, if a sequel doesn't fall under those special circumstances, I am not allowed to buy it unless I have read the first book in a series. And as you can see, That was not what happened with these. Now there's a couple of reasons why I think that these ones particularly snuck through. One of them being that this series is one of Lovely Spouse Harry's favourite series ever. It is one of the series that has made him actively cry on a couple of occasions, which is very not a thing that he does with books. But the other reason I think is there were just so many things going in this series' favour. It is about a luxury retirement community and the elderly people who live there solving murders together in a like, this is going to be a fun little club that we have way, which very feels like it fits with the kind of A, golden age crime that I usually read, and B, the fact that I really love elderly characters in books. But on top of that, the reviews for these ones are just kind of like off the charts good. I had seen very few people in my sort of like circles of booktube who had read these books and hadn't absolutely loved them. But sadly that was just not the case for me, and I think predominantly it's down to the author's voice. Richard Osman is a UK comedian who I have seen on quite a few shows that are like panel shows or guest shows, and I really don't care for his brand of humour or his like presentation of his humour, which unfortunately for me means that at least half of each of these books isn't going to work for me. Because when we aren't actively with the characters, when they aren't having dialogue with each other, which for the record I really loved in the first book, we just have an omniscient narrator sitting above the scene kind of going, oh look, there is this person. He doesn't know somebody is sneaking up behind him. Oh look, someone's hit him on the head. Why do you think they did that? And very much delivering puns in a way that's like, look, that was funny. You were supposed to laugh. And unfortunately I did not laugh because it felt kind of like sitting next to Richard Osman while he narrated different pieces of a TV show in my head, and it wasn't a good time. So sadly these are going, but if you have loved any of the books that Lovely Spouse Harry has recommended previously on the channel, then maybe these will be for you, and maybe this is just solely a me thing, because these are quite beloved in a lot of places. Alright, so if you have clocked the spines of these books already and you collect like Fairy Loot or Illumicrate editions of fantasy books, then you will probably already know what these are. But for the rest of you, these are the Jasmine Throne and the Oleander Sword by Tasha Suri. And unlike the Thursday Murder Club, which I'm sort of neither here nor there on the fact that I'm unhauling, it's just fine, these ones I am a little sadder about because I really enjoyed the Jasmine Throne, and there's a little part of me that's like, I could just keep this on my shelves and just reread it as a standalone, but that deep down knows that's not gonna happen, because generally, with very few exceptions, when I read a sequel of a series and it doesn't work for me, I tend to unhaul the series as a whole, because I know that if I'm not going to be continuing on with it, I'm unlikely to go back and read the first book. A few series which are the exception to this rule are things like the first Stillhouse Lake book, or Sweet Pea, or even kind of the Lies of Loch Lomora and series like that, where I've reread the first book multiple times, and then the second book maybe once or twice, but I've never reread any of the others in the series. A percentage which I suppose is helped by the fact that certain fantasy authors never actually finish their series. But anyway, I think that is going to be the realistic fate of these, which is really sad, because this is queer sapphic epic fantasy which is really heavily inspired by Bollywood, and how often do all of those words go together in a description of a book? It was such a fun romp, but unfortunately the second book really didn't live up to the first book for me. The tone felt very different. The characters felt a lot flatter for me in the second book than they were in the first book, and I had some questions about some of the things that happened in the plot. And so unfortunately both of these are going to make their way to my unhaul pile, and realistically if I desperately get the urge to reread this one, I can either get it from my library or get a paperback copy, which will take up far less real estate on my shelves than these will. So off to my unhaul pile they go, and I'm sure somebody on Vinted is going to be thrilled at managing to get both of these in perfect condition. Okay, so next up we have The Unholy Duo. Two thriller books that I recently read for a TBR Veterans vlog, and which put me in such a bad mood, and which I mostly blame for January being the kind of like super slumpy month that it was. First we've got True Crime Story by Joseph Knox, and then we have True Story by Kate Reid Petty. These are both mixed media books which take a true crime take on the thriller genre. They're meant to be like you're reading a true crime memoir, and neither of them hit the mark for me. This one was super problematic, massively male gazy, and had a lot of actual racial violence and also racial slurs printed on the page in a way that it just didn't need to be there. It also pitted all of the female characters against each other and is essentially a self-insert for the author because Joseph Knox appears in the book as the true crime writer. And then we have this one, which is very experimentally written. There are 4 different formats which kind of match the vibe of the 4 different versions of this cover on this book, which I thought was going to be really, really cool, but it's actually just kind of like reading somebody's creative writing homework. And on top of that, they used essay as the like massive twist in a really horrible victim blamey way, and the only person who really got to actually tell their true story in this was the 2 perpetrators of this. And it's just a weird book with some seriously uncomfortable viewpoints that I just won't be revisiting. Ugh. Okay, next up we have the book that caused me to cancel my Evernight subscription. Evernight is our quarterly horror subscription from Illumicrate, which started out really promising with some genuinely actually horrific books and has sort of like quietly descended into the same kind of like dark academia slash romancy type things. Books which kind of like tone wise definitely have one foot in YA, so definitely not the type of horror that I was looking for. And you know, I had a massive chat with my patrons about this and about the idea of subscription boxes pulling kind of like bait and switches, and while the consensus was generally yes, that's what a lot of them do, there was also kind of a pool of people who were like, I use subscription boxes to try different things that I wouldn't normally buy for myself, and so in that way this has definitely worked for them. So maybe this is just one of those cases of like subscription boxes are just not for me, because with almost every subscription service that I've had in the last couple of years, what happens is the first couple of books, especially if it's a new service, are very promising, and then my success rate with them turns into like 30%, and that's just not enough of an investment for me to want to spend money on. So anyway, long story short, I think I'm going to be staying away from book subscriptions and mystery book picks and things like that in the future, which means that An Academy for Liars by Alexis Henderson is also going to be going on the It's Leaving My House pile, because while it is absolutely stunning, like it's a beautiful book, the customizations for it are undeniably gorgeous, but when I saw the blurb and also when I saw the style of the end papers, which are a very particular style of, you usually see this on romantasy subscriptions, I knew that it was not going to be for me, and the first 24 pages of that kind of confirmed it. Also put this hand in hand with the fact that I have been burned a lot by things that are like dark academia recently. I'm thinking about things like An Education in Malice and A Study in Drowning, which again definitely have one foot in YA, definitely have one foot in romantasy. So yeah, I think I'm just going to be staying away from dark academia for a while, as well as staying away from subscription boxes. And speaking of staying away from dark academia, I have Madam by Phoebe Wynne. Now, unlike a lot of the other books in this pile, this is not actually a book that I hated. I liked this book just fine. I read it several years ago. It has stayed on my shelves through several culls, and I have recommended it to a few people whose thing that I definitely know that it is. Space on my horror shelves is at an absolute premium. My horror shelves are down in my living room. They consist of one half Billy bookcase with an extender, and my horror collection is one of the biggest turnovers in my entire library. I tend to buy horror and fantasy more than I buy anything else, and so space is just not available for books that I just liked but am not planning to read again. So although this is gorgeous, there was nothing wrong with it, it is still leaving my house. I am losing my voice because I am ranting about books. Alright, 2 other books that were in that TBR Veterans vlog. We have An Ascension by Martin McInnes, and I don't know how I have so much to say about a book that says so little in itself. This book is entirely filled with minutiae, with little intricately crafted thoughts that are all supposed to be really profound on the page, but instead are just like, why am I reading this? You're putting me to sleep. And also, as I've said in about 23 other places, this author has never met a sentence that they did not like, and each of these sentences just make these massive paragraphs which take up literally the whole page, all the way through the book. This was supposed to be a sort of like thrilling, twisty sci-fi that included like the Mariana Trench and a conspiracy about aliens, and it just ended up being the kind of book that I could see lots of people picking up in a bookstore because it's on every table and it's really, really recommended, and then it just gets left behind at a holiday resort somewhere to get like warped pages from the heat and being by the pool. And then there is the Tokyo Zodiac Murders. Now there's nothing actually wrong with this book. I really want to preface this when I say that I'm not getting rid of it for the same reason that I got rid of all of the other books that I DNF'd in my TBR Veterans vlog. I'm specifically getting rid of this one because it's just not my genre anymore. This is straight up crime. It's not thriller. It's a very traditional procedural mystery, and that used to really work for me at a certain time in my life, but it's just not a thing that I read anymore. I don't enjoy procedurals and I don't enjoy traditional detectives. So this one is going to a new home where hopefully somebody will enjoy all of those things. And then finally I have got 4 books of very varied subject. First up, I have 2 memoirs by Jeannie Vanesco, and look at the faded spine compared to the cover of this book. I don't know if it's showing up as well on camera, but it's really bad. Although I have contact film on my windows, which is like stopping the fading of the spines of my books, the same kind of thing that they put on like commercial units. Like lots of people have it in Australia and stuff like that because the UV is so high. There are certain dyes that publishers use on their spines, particularly orange ones, particularly the more fluorescent ones, which are just... Anyway, these are 2 separate memoirs, one which I have read and I really, really loved, and one which I haven't read, both from the same author. Now I actually bought these at 2 separate times independently of each other, not actually linking the author's surname at all. The first one is Things I Didn't Talk About When I Was a Girl, and it is quite a remarkable and very individual true crime memoir about an SA that Jeannie Vanesco went through when they were in college. It was their best friend who perpetrated it. They never talked about it ever again, but it reshaped Jeannie's entire life, and years later they decided, with like the support of their husband and other support system, to reach out to this man and to ask him why it happened. And because Jeannie was like a journalist and somebody who was predisposed to kind of like process their life by writing it down, they ended up interviewing him, transcribed in here with his permission, but obviously with his name redacted. And it's really interesting. It's really interesting to go through all of the feelings that she had about this man, both then and afterwards, and now that you're putting together all these different versions of him and all these different versions of her who were impacted by it. But while it is really remarkable and really interesting and really unique when it comes to this kind of memoir, it's not something that I'm ever going to read again because it was so triggering. Again, this is definitely one where I'm like, you really, really need to protect your peace when you're reading this one. But if any of the themes sound like something which you would quite like to read about, I would so recommend that you pick this one up. That being said, this one is a memoir about Jeannie Vanesco's father and her very complicated relationship with him, and an investigation into a half-sister that she didn't know she had and how she died. And while I normally absolutely love family memoirs like this, particularly these kind of like very twisty ones where somebody is investigating things long after the people who could provide the answers are gone, I super struggled to get into this one because the writing in this one is very like the writing in this one, but it works for this topic and it doesn't work for this one in my personal opinion. So I'm gonna get rid of this one as well, with again the caveat that it didn't work for me, but that doesn't mean that it's a bad book. And in that same vein, another investigative family memoir is this one. I don't know why I'm suddenly holding things in this hand when they've lived in this hand their entire life. This is Missing Persons or My Grandmother's Secrets by Claire Wills, and again it is an investigation into some things that Claire Wills turns up in her family's history. Claire Wills' family is Irish, and she discovers that her grandmother had a baby who was taken in by the Irish Catholic orphanage system. The system essentially set up for unwed mothers where the nuns would take the baby and rehome it with like a good Catholic family, and the mother could move on with her life as an unscarred person in the Catholic Church's eyes, I guess. And this was interesting, but it also kind of didn't focus on the things that I thought that it was going to. This book both went not far enough and too far into some topics. So for me, the actual orphanage system itself, while it was displayed here in a couple of different like really harrowing ways, didn't really get as much investigation as it really could have, versus Claire Wills' actual family, which, like, to the end of the book, I kind of felt like we were just there as observers while Claire looked through her family's history and went, ooh, isn't that interesting? As opposed to anything that she was investigating being actually deeply relevant to the topic. It felt like reading two different things, neither of which really hit their mark. And yet, for something that's this short, I feel like it could have been a bit more polished. And again, this one comes very much under the umbrella of, like, I am critiquing the way in which the story was presented, not the story itself. And again, I'm sad from a purely aesthetic perspective because this is like a really cool book. I love how vintage that it looks and I would have loved to keep it on my shelves from that point of view, but off it goes. And then finally, in the deepest show of ho-hum that I possibly can muster, we have Didion and Babbitts by Lily Anulik, and this one was a bad book. It just was. I have very recently gone very in-depth into my thoughts of this one in my last tops and bottoms. If you would like to hear a much more comprehensive review of this book and the reasons that I didn't like it, you can check that video out. But in a nutshell, Lily Anulik does for feminism in this book what the Republicans are currently doing for reproductive rights in the US. Rolling it back like many, many years. This was supposed to be an investigative memoir about Didion and Babbitts based on a box of letters that had been found after Eve Babbitts' apartment had been cleaned out, that was a sealed box of letters from years and years going back and forth between Joan Didion and Eve Babbitts, who very famously did not like each other in the 60s when they were writing about sort of like Hollywood, the culture of the East Coast at the time. And for all of these reasons, it was a book that I thought that I was going to absolutely love, and the introduction to this is literally prize-winning. The introduction to this is so freaking good, but the rest of the book is this gossipy, catty mess of the author pitting both of these people against each other and very, very favourably coming down on the side of Eve Babbitts while making Joan Didion look like all of the choices that she made and all of the ways in which she presented herself to the world were really like fake, really calculated, really harsh. And I don't know, it's just a weird take. It's a weird take for a female author who purportedly absolutely loves and admires one of these authors and is doing an investigation into the other one, to make this some sort of like backbitey, celebrity name dropping catfight of a book in which the letters between the two of them are so sparse and so redacted that it's actually kind of impossible to tell what the actual contents of the full letters would have given you had she not presented them in this format. And there's also a couple of like really not great attitudes in here to essay as well, which seems to be a theme in this pile of books that I'm not enjoying emerging, really. So I am devastated to say that one of my most anticipated books for last year was a massive, massive flop. And also, in the time that it took myself and my lovely friend Sarah, who I was buddy reading this with, to read this book, we watched the ratings of this go from like 5 stars on Goodreads all the way to like 3.26, which I think is where it's sitting right now. And I would not be surprised if they continue to fall after this, to be perfectly honest. So yeah, this one is going on my shit pile. So that is it, guys. That is the end of my first salty unhaul for 2025. There will be more in the future, I am absolutely sure. If you got all the way through this video, then please leave me a springtime emoji down below, because even your bestie here who loves the dark and dingy gothic feel of a Scottish winter is ready for something new, both outside and in my books. And don't forget, if you would like to get your hands on a game-changing Serious Light from Serious Readers, then you can use my code here on screen, WINN, that's WINN, and my link down below in the description to get yourself a whopping saving. A definite treat for both your aesthetic and your eyeballs. As always, don't forget to tell me whether you have read any of the books that I've talked about here today. Do you agree with me that they deserve to go, or would you have kept them? And please let me know the last book that you unhauled from your collection down below, because I'm always nosy to hear that. If you are new to my channel and you would like to see a haul to counteract like the unhaul, then please hit that subscribe button because we have the first haul of the year coming very, very soon. And if you are a returning subscriber to my channel who absolutely adores the salt of the salty unhauls, then please hit that like button on the way out because it really does help my channel, and I will speak to you guys really soon. Bye!